He still didn't know that this discovery would almost make him believe that keeping it was dangerous, that it could bring him not money but trouble, and that very soon he would be persistently told why it would be better to get rid of it as quickly and as quietly as possible before it was too late and before someone else found out about it. He found the ring by accident, but from the very first second he felt that there was nothing accidental about it, as if the object had been waiting far too long to be discovered precisely at this moment. The old dresser had stood in the corner of the room for years, and no one suspected that there was an empty space hidden inside until he noticed that the bottom of one drawer bent unnaturally, as if it had been made with a false layer. When he pressed harder, a soft click broke the silence, tightening his throat instinctively, and the panel lifted, revealing a narrow compartment with a worn, unmarked box and several folded documents yellowed with age. He opened the box and immediately felt the weight of the ring, far too heavy to be a simple trinket, cold and solid, as if the object itself was reminding him that it had a past. On the seal was a faded coat of arms and barely visible initials, as though someone had tried to erase its identity but had not managed to do so completely. He turned the ring in his fingers, and the longer he looked at it, the stronger the feeling became that it was not just old, but deliberately hidden, as if its owner never wanted it to be found. His thoughts tangled together. If it was worthless, why hide it? And then if it had value, why did no one know about it? Several times he tried to put the ring away and forget about it, but each time he caught himself unable to do so, as if from that moment on, the decision no longer belonged to him alone. He understood that if he told someone, questions would begin, and if he stayed silent, the doubts would never leave him, so he chose what seemed to be the safest option, to simply document the discovery. He recorded a short video, took several photographs in different lighting, trying to make out the symbols on the seal, and hid the box back in its place, convincing himself that this was the end of it. But it was precisely at that moment that he took the first step, after which the ring stopped being just a discovery and became the cause of events where he would be told that it was worthless, that it could bring problems, and that it would be better to give it up voluntarily before someone else did it for him. The first message arrived sooner than he expected, almost as if someone had been waiting for the photos to appear. The man introduced himself as an antiques evaluator and spoke with calm confidence, the kind that makes doubt sound unreasonable. He said the coat of arms was too worn to identify, that the initials meant nothing without provenance, and that the metal itself was ordinary, nothing rare or precious. According to him, rings like this had been produced in large numbers, often mistaken for something valuable when they were not. He named a price, $300, not as an offer but as a courtesy, adding that it would save time and avoid disappointment. What unsettled him wasn't the amount, but how final the conclusion sounded, as if the value of the ring had already been decided somewhere beyond discussion. The evaluator didn't rush him, didn't pressure him, and even suggested that holding on to the ring wasn't worth the effort, subtly framing the idea of keeping it as pointless. Later that evening, he reread the messages and noticed small details he had missed at first. How quickly the evaluator dismissed the ring without asking for more images, how confidently he spoke about its origin based on a few photos, and how he repeatedly emphasized that such items rarely lead to anything good. By the next day, another message arrived, different in tone but more disturbing. The evaluator claimed he had checked several databases and warned that similar rings were sometimes tied to inheritance disputes or unresolved claims, situations that could attract unwanted attention. He didn't say it directly, but the implication was clear. Trying to sell the ring publicly could cause problems. The safest option, he suggested, was to let it go quietly. As he read the message, a slow unease settled in. The ring was no longer being discussed as an object, but as a risk. He began to wonder why a supposedly worthless piece suddenly carried so many warnings, and why someone who claimed it had no value seemed so invested in convincing him to get rid of it. He saved the conversation, closed the app, and for the first time since finding the ring, felt that he might already be part of something he didn't fully understand. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he let the messages sit unanswered, hoping the silence would bring clarity, but it only made the situation feel heavier. That same evening, another notification appeared, and this time the evaluator sounded less detached and more insistent, asking whether he had decided and reminding him that unnecessary attention could complicate things. The wording was careful, almost polite, yet there was an undercurrent that made the message feel less like advice and more like a warning. The evaluator repeated that these kinds of objects often cause trouble for people who didn't understand what they were dealing with, hinting that holding on to the ring could create consequences he wasn't prepared for. The pressure continued subtly over the next day. Short messages arrived, each one reinforcing the same idea that keeping the ring was risky, that selling it quietly would be the smartest move, and that delaying could make things worse. What unsettled him most was how the evaluator seemed to anticipate his thoughts, addressing doubts he hadn't voiced and questions he hadn't asked. It felt less like a conversation and more like someone steering him toward a single outcome. The ring, once a silent object hidden in a drawer, now seemed to follow him through every message, turning into a source of constant tension. Unable to shake the feeling that something was off, he decided not to handle it alone. He took the ring out again, carefully wrapped it, and went to see his grandfather, not because he expected answers, but because he needed a second pair of eyes he could trust. As he placed the ring on the table, the unease he had been carrying shifted into something sharper because the moment his grandfather saw it, the expression on his face changed and the room suddenly felt much smaller. His grandfather didn't react the way he expected. There was no surprise, no hesitation, just a slow, focused silence. He took the ring, turned it carefully in his hands, and studied the worn seal under the light as if he were reading something invisible to anyone else. After a long pause, he said that this wasn't merely a ring, but a personal seal, the kind once used to authenticate documents, agreements, and private correspondence. Even in its faded state, the coat of arms was recognizable to him, belonging to an old family line whose symbols were rarely found outside private collections. He explained that objects like this were often targeted by experienced buyers who knew that the easiest way to acquire them wasn't force or theft, but doubt, convincing the owner that what they had was ordinary, risky, or worthless. As the explanation unfolded, the messages from the evaluator suddenly made sense. The dismissive tone, the warnings, the emphasis on possible problems were not meant to help, but to isolate him and rush his decision. Following his grandfather's advice, he decided to test the situation. He replied to the evaluator, casually mentioning that he was planning to submit the ring for an official museum examination. The response came almost instantly, as if the message had been anticipated. The evaluator urged him to reconsider, claiming that museums often complicated matters and created unnecessary attention. Then, without explanation, the offer increased. When that still didn't work, the tone shifted again, requests to remove photos, suggestions to stop discussing the ring publicly, subtle reminders that discretion was in his best interest. Each new message only confirmed the truth. A worthless object would not inspire urgency, fear, or escalating offers. With the help of his grandfather, he saved every message, documented the changes in tone, and contacted a lawyer to understand his options. What began as a simple attempt to learn the value of an old ring had now turned into clear evidence of manipulation, and he realized that the moment he refused to be rushed, the balance of power quietly shifted back in his favor. And the official examination confirmed what the evaluator had tried so hard to hide. The ring was authentic, historically documented, and far more valuable than it had been made to seem. Through a trusted intermediary, the ring was offered to a private collector who understood exactly what it was worth and didn't rely on pressure or manipulation. The deal was completed quietly and legally, and the final price was $7,800. Looking back, he realized that the real danger hadn't been the ring itself, but how close he had come to believing someone else's version of its value. If he had rushed, doubted himself, or ignored the warning signs, the outcome would have been very different. So what do you think about this story? Did he make the right decisions? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to know your opinion.